Hi guys, I'm Erin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the bookish preferences tag. I don't know if this is like technically a tag, but this was a video I saw Murphy do on her channel, which I'll link below, just kind of answering some questions about your general bookish preferences, so I thought it'd be fun to answer. And so I'm going to specifically be answering about my fantasy bookish preferences, since that is my favorite genre, and also I know my answers might differ a little bit depending on for romance, which is my second favorite genre, so these are specifically my fantasy bookish preferences. The first question is, which perspective is your favorite? I would probably say third, but it's not a strong preference. Point of like which perspective isn't something that sticks with me in books. Like you could ask me about a book I finished 4 days ago and say, well, was this first person or third person? And I like legitimately probably could not tell you. It would be kind of a guess. I just like that's like not a thing about books that sticks in my mind at all. The only time it sticks in my mind is if it's like something weird, like second person. Like I could tell you the Broken Earth trilogy since it has second person because that is unique enough to stick in my brain. But first person versus third just doesn't stick with me, so I think I prefer third person. That being said, I know I prefer third person in other situations, other types of writing, so I think I also prefer third person in fantasy. Okay, next question. Which format is your favorite? I'm gonna say paperback. I have a slight preference for mass market because they're smaller and more portable and also cheaper. But it feels like fantasy has been moving away from mass market, and I don't find as many in mass market as far as trade, so I just have a lot more trade paperbacks, as you can see. A lot of trade paperbacks. Not all these are fantasy, but most of them are. And then like not very many mass markets. But definitely paperback. Hardback's not bad, like I'm not anti-hardback, but it's more expensive, so I don't like buying them as much. And paperbacks are easier just to read like when I'm lying in bed, and they're more transportable. I also read a decent amount of ebooks, just because library ebooks are really convenient as far as checking out, because I don't have to go to the library to do it. But I definitely prefer reading on actual paper. Though ebooks are very convenient, which is a big plus of them for me. It's easy to just bring my e-reader places. And audiobooks just are my favorite. And when I do listen to audiobooks, I tend not to listen to fantasy audiobooks. So since this is my fantasy book preferences, definitely not my favorite. I think if I drove more, like I had a long commute or traveled a lot from work, I could get into audiobooks more, but like I don't just like sitting and listening to an audiobook because I get too distracted. So I've listened to audiobooks before when I've like gone on walks, and like that's pretty nice, but that's kind of the only time. And I prefer contemporary or mysteries and audiobooks than fantasy anyways. Question 3. Do you prefer a character or plot focused book? Definitely plot. I definitely can enjoy character focused. They're not just like an automatic dislike. Like I liked Circe by Madeline Miller, and I believe that's character focused. I'm currently enjoying The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is definitely character focused, but I definitely prefer plot focused. And character focused generally aren't gonna become new favorites, usually. I don't necessarily need deep characters to enjoy a book if the plot's super engrossing, and as long as the character isn't like awful, like awfully written, and they're just like entertaining or fun, that's good enough for me. I don't need deep characters. I don't need characters to like grow over books, which I think is kind of a popular opinion. And definitely if the book has like little to no plot, there's less of a chance I'll like it. But I still do like them sometimes, so it's not a total write-off. But so yeah, definitely plot focused. Question 4. Do you care about prose? Usually no. I would have said no until recently when I DNF'd a series because I really hated the prose. So the answer is usually no, but very occasionally yes. And so that series was Lightbringer. I really, really disliked the prose in Lightbringer, and so I decided to not finish that series because I just didn't want to have to read it anymore. But I often don't put much focus on prose. It's not something I tend to have a ton of comments on. If it's more flowery or beautiful writing, I can like recognize that and like say that like, oh, this is really beautiful writing, but I don't need it to be beautiful to like. And also prose doesn't stick with me as well either, like with first person perspective. Like I'm not someone who could talk about who had what kind of prose and like what made certain authors' prose unique over others, so that's just not something that sticks with me at all. Question 5. How introspective do you want your characters to be? I guess I don't care. As I was saying earlier, like, I don't need characters to, like, necessarily grow and change over the course of a fantasy book. And I think growing and changing is kind of what a lot of introspection leads to. And so I'm not anti-introspection, but, like, I'm not necessarily looking for it either. Though, again, since I do prefer plot over character-driven books, that probably kind of explains why I don't care as much about introspection, because that feels like more of a preference for people who like character. A preference that people who like character-driven books have more of an opinion on. Question 6. How do you like your relationships? Yes, all of the above, all kinds. As I mentioned earlier, romance is my second favorite genre, and so I quite enjoy romantic subplots in fantasy books. I don't need them. Like, I'm perfectly content to read a fantasy book that doesn't have any romance in it. I also do love friendships in fantasy books as well. I think they're fun. I also like family relationships in fantasy books, so kind of I like all relationships in fantasy books, I guess, is my answer. I don't really have a preference towards one or the other. Question 7. Do you like a lot of description? I guess with characters, I want some description, but character descriptions just don't stick in my head past 1 or 2 defining features. So once you hit those kind of defining features, I don't really need more, because it's not gonna stick. I don't know. I just, like, I have a hard time picturing characters even when they are fully described. So if you're, like, getting intricate with your character description, it just doesn't do a lot for me. So I guess I prefer if you keep it to, like, some defining features, but kind of leave a little bit up to the imagination, because I'm not going to picture them accurately probably anyway, because only certain things are going to stick in my brain unless you mention every page, in which case you probably shouldn't be writing like that. Like, that probably isn't going to come off well in a story. As far as, like, other descriptions, I think I like a little bit more description for worlds. I just want to really feel like I'm in the world, even if I don't have, like, a clear, exact recreation in my mind of exactly what the scene setting is. I think I need enough description to be able to kind of feel the setting, which is more description than I require for characters as well. For other things, like for fight scenes, I need a very specific kind of description. So I don't like reading fight scenes a lot, just because I have a hard time with the descriptions and picturing them. So fight scenes to me, less is more with description. The only exception being Sebastian de Castell, who has impeccably written fight scenes. His are my favorite because I've never had any trouble picturing his fight scenes. But usually for me, fight scenes, less is more, just because I have a hard time picturing it, so I don't want to read tons of description about it. Question 8. Do you prefer standalones or series? I prefer series, but by less of a margin than I used to. I've come to appreciate standalones to throw around with my fantasy, but I definitely do prefer series. I just like being in worlds longer. I like following characters longer than I do in standalones. And usually with standalones, even if they, like, wrap up the story, half the time I'm like, yeah, I would totally read more books in this world. So definitely prefer series, but I have had a growing appreciation for standalones to kind of break it up, just so I'm not, because if I'm always reading series, I'm just like, I'm trying to rein in the number of series I start without finishing, and so having some standalones to throw in the middle, I think, helps with that. Question 9, single point of view or multiple point of view? Definitely multiple point of view. I won't, like, not read a book if it's a single point of view, but I definitely prefer multiple points of views. I like it when there's, like, more than one point of view that are kind of, like, in different parts of the world, and, like, their stories come together, or on, like, you get to see different sides of the story unfold. And I just like being with different characters. That way, if there's a point of view character I don't like, they're not the only one, because that would kind of kill the book. If the point of view character I just hated, found them annoying or something, and they were the only point of view character, like, that's not going to end great. So I like having more than one in case that happens. And the last question, do you prefer a strong start, middle, or finish? And I don't know. Yes, all. I am not quick to DNF books, so I don't necessarily need a super strong start, because I'll usually keep reading anyways. But I guess like a strong start will hook me more. So, then in the middle, I guess the middle is the least important, because if you've hooked me with a strong start, I'm more forgiving of slow middles, I think, if you've already hooked me. But again, because I am not a big DNFer, even if you have a slow start and a slow middle, there's a good chance I'll still push through. Maybe not always, but I am not quick to DNF. And then Strong finishes, again, I definitely appreciate, especially if there's a next book in the series, because it'll get me hyped. But I think if you have a slow middle and slow start and a strong finish, I always end up feeling like, okay, that was great, but also I didn't like a lot of it, and I don't know how to feel. So I think my answer is going to be strong start, um, just because that'll get me in the story quickest. But I've never really thought about it. This is kind of the first time I've ever thought about having a preference between those three. So I don't really know. So that's an interesting question. But anyways, thanks for listening to my bookish preferences video. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!